Hey everybody, we are back for another episode of NDI November. We're going to be talking all about NDI throughout the entire month of November. So definitely make sure to register at NDINovember.com. And as always, we are going to be having a lot of prizes. So definitely make sure that you check those out. You can see all the prizes and when they're going to be announced at NDINovember.com. Today, we are super excited because we're going to be talking with Matt from Canon, talking about their PTZ cameras and their cinema cameras as well. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and say hello?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, James. I'm so happy to be here talking tech with you. I am Matthew Irving, or Matt. You can call me Matt. I'm a senior technical specialist with Canon USA, and I'm coming to you now from our Canon Burbank facility, which is located in beautiful downtown Burbank, as Johnny Carson used to say. And I have the prep bay behind me, and I've got some fun gear here to demo, as well as some slides to go through.
Oh yeah, this is one that you guys are not going to want to miss. We're going to have demos throughout this entire show. So let's start it off with talking about basically the entire indoor PTZ range. Starting off with the CR-N100 and the CR-N300. Why don't you give us an overview of the entire range and, tell us the differences between the CR-N100 and the 300, and then we'll talk about the 500 and 700.
Absolutely. Happy to do so. Our PTZs come in basically two sizes, you can see on this handy little chart. And we have the N100 and the N300 that have the half-inch sensors. And that they might be the smaller sensor, but that gives you a 20 times optical zoom. So you get a little more bang for your zoom buck on those. And the 100 is our lowest price model, and it does not have SDI, but it does have HDMI that can crank out the 4K 30. So if you only need HDMI and don't need SDI, the 100 is a great way to go. The 300 just bumps you up by having the option of doing 3G SDI, which is capable of 1080p. And then you bump up to our little bit larger models, our N500 and our N700. These both have 1-inch sensors, which gives you a little more of that cinematic look. But the trade-off, of course, is because you have a larger sensor, now you have a 15 times optical zoom instead of the 20 times optical zoom. But because of the larger sensor, these are better in low light. They're going to be a little less noisy in low light, although the N300 and N100 perform spectacularly. And there are some things built in now to our user interfaces that can dial any low light noise right out just beautifully. But again, the N500 has the 3G SDI, so you can get 1920 by 1080 out of that camera. Whereas the N700, which I'm actually coming to you live on right here, using an N700 for this demo, this actually has a 12G SDI on the back, so you can get your full 4K 60 out of that. And because of that 4K 60 possibility coming out of that rear SDI, this now has a crop function where you can shoot two sizes of a subject at the same time. You can shoot one, just the full 4K, and then you can do a crop into the 2K or the HD size. So a lot more flexibility there. But yeah, like I said, I'll just do a little handy switcheroo here on my switcher. This is the camera that is shooting me right now, and this is the N700 camera. I can wiggle it back and forth on my controller just so you see that it is indeed what it is, a PTZ.
All right, not that we didn't believe you. No,
You didn't believe me.
we talked about you talked about the HDMI and the SDI on the back of these cameras, but all of these cameras are also compatible with NDI, which is what we are talking about today. And so I just wanted to note that all of these cameras are NDI HX compatible, which is great. So you do have the addition of choosing HDMI or SDI on the higher models, but all of them are NDI compatible, which is great for exactly what we're talking about, NDI.
Exactly right. And that'll come into play on a little bit later. We have a slide that has a nice handy connection diagram, and you'll be able to see the NDI on that as well. But yeah, next slide here is just obviously PTZ is pan tilt zoom capability. And this comes with a lot of different possibilities in terms of how you want to control the camera. Right now, I have it hooked up to a control to do a deeper dive on later, but I can get into my camera here, and I can, you can pan, tilt, zoom. You can do all of these different things, all with the controller. This is all through the XC protocol that I'll talk about a little bit later. But get my camera back to where it's supposed to be. But
Yeah,
about that. There we go. Here I am. But yeah, not only can you do that, but I also just used a preset to get back to my hero angle here that I knew I'd be panning and tilting these cameras around a little bit. So I did go to the preset menu here, and I had a special preset just programmed that has a little thumbnail of what it is when I programmed it. And I can just hit that, and I can come back to my home angle here for ease of operation. Apart from the preset, there's also the traces. Traces are super cool because you can actually record a camera move. You literally hit record on the controller, execute a camera move from point A to point B. It can have focus change. It can have pan, tilt, zoom control changes, and then it'll record that exact move over a particular duration of time. And that move is exactly repeatable when you hit that trace to do so.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch upon that because we were talking about this right before we started recording. And, a lot of the times when you talk about presets, a lot of PTZ cameras can do presets, but a lot of the times you got to cut away from it because when you go from preset 1 to preset 2, it's going to be, a straight line. The camera's going to go as fast as it can. But with this trace thing, you can make it a little bit more cinematic, make it look a little more natural. And I think that is something that a lot of end users are going to appreciate. And then, not having to worry about, oh, how steady is my hand right now? You just got to get one clean recording and then you're good to go. The other thing that we're talking about before we started recording is auto looping. Can you tell us what that is and how that plays into presets?
Yes, and just to give one other finer point to what you were just talking about, the trace actually records all the organic feel of the operator. But if you just want to get from point A to point B without recording a trace, you can go from one preset to another more smoothly than you would think, and you could change those durations of changes as well. So you could get from point A to point B in a number of different ways, depending on what workflow works best for you. But the auto loop that you just brought up is super cool too, because auto loop is a transition between different presets that the system kind of just does on its own. So if you're recording a band, it might just be able to move from the bassist to the drummer to the lead singer, just kind of in a continuous loop, and then back to the bassist again. And you can program durations, and you can program the smoothness of those moves. So if you want the camera to kind of just go on its own, you can activate that auto loop for that feature.
Absolutely. And I think another area where that is going to work well is someplace like a house of worship where, you're working on volunteers and you may not have a full crew. So that's one less thing that the volunteer has to worry about is they can add a little bit of automation into their camera movements. And I think that's a great feature or add-on. Speaking on add-ons, there are a ton of add-ons that you can get with the entire line of PTZ cameras. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the most popular add-on is our auto tracking application. Now, this follows you as a speaker around the room, and there's sort of a free auto tracking application that you can get that has a little limited feature set, but will get the basic job done. And then there is the paid auto tracking application that gives you a little more flexibility in terms of the feature set. And with the full auto tracking, you can sort of select your image size. You can actually select a silhouette to fit. I actually have that on my system here. So if I go to this N700, which has the auto tracking, you can see I've set a silhouette for it to track me here. And if I activate the auto tracking, it's gonna find me in that silhouette. and then it's going to be able to track me around as I move with that silhouette. And then if I go back to my normal camera, you can see that it's tracking me all around the place. So this is the full paid auto tracking that I can select that size of silhouette, and I can change that size of silhouette as well by going into the add-on menu and going into silhouette view. Whoops, it's already on. I can go to the display size rather, and if I wanted a little wider shot of myself, I can select that. And now the auto tracking is going to go to a wider composition instead of the closer one. It's kind of revealing the behind the scenes of my set here.
And one thing that I want to note while you're, showing this off is you have your laptop blocking half of your body, but it's still able to track you very well. So
absolutely, yes.
I just wanted to point that out, that, we can only see about a third of your body and it's still tracking you incredibly well.
Yes, it's a very effective system. And now I've hit a preset to come back into this this composition instead. But the auto tracking is very effective. It's about on its third firmware generation now. So you know how that works. It's gotten very good and refined. But what's great is with the auto tracking, if you're giving sort of a whiteboard demonstration, you can actually make exclusion zones, and you can make sort of whiteboard mode where you can tell the camera to never have the whiteboard leave the frame. You can have areas for exclusion zones, like I said, where you can control the PTZ so it won't pan into a certain area if that's not, something you want. So there's a lot of different flexibility on the auto tracking.
I see that working out extremely well in a place like an auditorium. If the speaker walks off the stage, you don't want the camera to keep following them as they walk off the stage.
Right.
So I think that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other of the add-on applications that you wanted to highlight?
I wasn't going to at this time, but yeah, I just wanted to really highlight the auto tracking because that's the one that's really getting the most play.
Yeah, definitely. And you and the viewers at home can give us a call and we can talk about more of these in depth. Now, I know that we talked about this before we started recording as well. And we're going to bring this up full screen because this is kind of explaining all of those connection points that we were talking about at the top of the show. So why don't you kind of explain what's going on and all of the different connections that these cameras offer?
Absolutely. So all of these PTZs are just really robust in terms of how they're going to connect into your workflow. We have our XC protocol, which I can talk about a little more with our controller later, but our XC protocol is our control protocol and our video protocol that is meant to go to our controllers. And this, as you will see in a few minutes, will also link our PTZs with all of our studio cameras, all of our Canon studio cameras. They're all linked by the XC protocol. So that's kind of our key protocol that links all of our ecosystem together. But we also do have, of course, NDI HX capability. So play very well with the NewTek TriCaster, all these switchers in the workflow that any kind of already established workflow playing nicely with the NDI. We have RTMP, RTSP, all of these kind of things if you want to go sort of straight to Facebook Live or something like that. Secure Reliable Transport Protocol, the SRT, is becoming a very big thing, and we are capable of that. And so all of these things kind of are designed to fit into existing protocols with very little pain point. And at the same time, you could be sending your SDI out to a monitor. You could be sending or the SDI out to the switcher, an HDMI out to the monitor. So all of these outputs, all of these cameras work very well in any existing system. And then at the very bottom of that connection diagram, and who doesn't love a connection diagram? I mean, come on. But at the very bottom of that is something called FreeD. And this is kind of a virtual studio production protocol. And this helps the camera communicate focal length and then also where you're focused on the lens. All of these things can communicate with live compositing tools that you'd find at sort of news outlets, that where a guy is walking around a model of a bridge that collapsed or something, so that the camera can play well with any of these kind of live compositing tools. And it's,
yeah, no, I think that's great that you're giving the end users all of these options. You can use as much or as little of these options as you want. And it's the same thing with the add-ons. You know, not everybody needs to use everyone, but you give them the option to use whatever they want to be able to use. And something like 3D is exactly that. Let's also talk about your web GUI. I know that not too long ago, this was updated and there's some new features. So why don't you kind of explain how the web GUI works?
Yeah, I mean, once you have a IP address for each of your individual cameras, you can, of course, bring up an individual web browser control page for the camera, where you have a viewer. You have kind of zoom controls off to the right of the viewer there. You'll see that one is gray and one is blue. For the zoom controls, the blue zoom control is your digital zoom that exceeds the length of your optical zoom if you need it. But there are all these different pages across the GUI where you have exposure control, you have image quality control, you have focus control. So with an individual camera on an individual web browser page, you can control all of these features. You can also paint the camera. You can go into your master pedestal. You can go into your blue gain and red gain to really fine tune the image if you need to color match exactly to some other camera that's in your system. So you can get all your cameras to match by using all the intricate tools and these sliders that are at your disposal. You can also activate our add-ons. You can activate our auto tracking through this. You can select the size of your silhouette and everything through these. So it's a very robust kind of user interface for each individual camera.
One thing that I wanted to touch upon was, and you briefly mentioned this at the beginning, all of these cameras, all of these PTZ cameras are 4K compatible. And I really want to highlight that you have both the optical and the digital zoom, because again, not everybody's going to be outputting in 4K, but because you have a 4K sensor on it, you can do a digital zoom and output at 1080 or stream at 1080, and you'll have a lossless digital zoom. So even if you're using, let's say the CR-N500 or 700, which has a lower optical zoom, but if you're outputting at 1080, you can still gain some of that zoom back.
Absolutely.
So I think that's great that you have those separated on your web GUI there. So I just wanted to highlight that. You kind of glossed over it, and I wanted to bring it back.
I appreciate that. You're hired by Canon.
Well, thank you. I already have a job, but thank you.
Okay.
Fair enough. We're talking about remote control as well, and there is some more control protocols that you could talk about with here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that the web browser is our single camera control, where each camera has its own IP address, and you can access it that way. Or you can use our remote camera control application, the RCCA for short. And on this app, you can bring up multiple cameras into the same controller, and you can flip between one and another and do all of these same controls. You can still paint the image. You can zoom, pan, tilt. If you see on the right side of this in the orange box, there's sort of arrows up, down, right, left. And so you can actually pan and tilt the camera around with those arrows. And again, you can get into your presets. You can get into your traces. You can program these things with traces. You can do all of the things pretty much that we've talked about, all of the capabilities of the PTZs through this remote camera control application by bringing in those multiple cameras. And then you can choose how many different cameras you're seeing within a single viewer. And as it says on the slide, you can control up to 20 cameras from a single screen. So that's kind of a fun, laptop-based system that you can use. Similarly, just in terms of bringing in our other cameras, I do want to just quickly demo. We also have a multi-camera control app, which is iPhone-based. Get focus on this. And with this, you can actually bring in a live view. So this is my C80 camera that I'll talk about in a little bit. And I have it hooked up through XC Protocol to our MCCA app, which is available at your all your finest app stores. So we have a number of different control possibilities for the cameras that you'd be hooking up into your overall, live workflow.
No, I think that's great. And we're also going to talk about the controller in just a minute here too.
Yes.
So that's another big one. And speaking of that,
Yes.
I know you wanted to talk a little bit about your cinema cameras or studio cameras as well. So let's dive into that.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the thing. This is why we call this the, if we could go, that slide right there says it. It's our Canon ecosystem. And what we love is all these PTZs that we're talking about can intercut seamlessly with our cinema cameras. And all of these cameras, cinema cameras included, have this XC protocol, which ties us into our controllers. It ties you into those ability to manipulate the image, choose a gamma curve, choose which color matrix, all of these things. You can make all of these cameras match because the beauty is that our PTZs have the same Canon color science. They have the same lenses in a lot of cases as some of our camcorders. For instance, the camera that I'm shooting you on right now, this N700, literally has the same lens and a lot of the same capabilities as our XF605 camera. It's basically an XF605 in a pan and tilt and zoom shell. So very high quality, even though they're PTZ cameras and people think that PTZ cameras are somehow less than, they're not. They're right up there and can intercut seamlessly, even with our cinema cameras. And as you see here on this slide, the XC protocol brings these all together, whether it's PTZ or studio camera, that can bring you in. You can go in SDI into your switcher while you're going IP. These are all IP linked into the XC protocol into our controllers. So you can go to either our browser or our remote camera control app down there on the lower right with those laptops, or you can go into our Canon controllers, including the RC-IP1000, which I have here, and we'll talk about in a little bit.
I think this is really great. We're again talking about the entire Canon ecosystem, and I think that it's great that you mentioned that, some people do think that PTZ cameras are, for smaller studios, prosumer studios, but Canon's really showing that these can be used in a broadcast element, and not only used in a broadcast element, but be paired with broadcast cameras, and like you said, seamlessly, and being able to, control all of your color and making sure that, all of your PTZ cameras color match with your, your XF605 or whatever it may be, and being able to have not just one centralized location to be able to do all of that, but, potentially 4 or 5 different ways that you can do that color control. And again, just giving the end user the decision to control it however they best see fit. So kudos to the XC protocol.
Because a lot of, so many live events or houses of worship are going to have a couple live camera operators potentially, and then a smattering of PTZs around where they can get closer and be out of the way. Our PTZs come in black and white colors so that you can make them kind of disappear into the furniture the best you can. They can be mounted on walls or upside down from trellises with the image flipped. So they're very flexible, but you still might want the ability to have, 1 or 2 operators on some of our cinema cameras down on the ground. And so here, this slide is now making that transition because our PTZs, apart from having literally the same lenses and color science as our cinema cameras, what makes the lenses really match is these 9-bladed irises on these PTZs. And that makes for very rounded bokeh in the background. So really nice cinematic shape to the background. And also an odd number of blades makes for a little bit more pleasing refracted light patterns. So we have the 9-bladed iris as well for that. And that really goes a long way towards giving a lot of that cinematic look is, what that out of focus area in the background looks like.
No, exactly. And, we're talking about specifically with the CR-N700 and the 500, these also have 1-inch sensors on them. So that will also help with giving that cinematic look by having a shallower depth of field and making those, as you just said, those bokeh look really nice and circular.
Yeah. And then another part of that that helps to get that out of focus area more out of focus is that all of our PTZs, just as all of our cinema cameras have neutral density filters. And in particularly the N500 and the N700 have the same kind of turret style neutral density filter wheel that our cinema cameras have. So you can dial in your 2 stops, 4 stops, and 6 stops of neutral density right into the camera. And that allows you to open up the iris as wide as possible, which throws the background more out of focus. So you get that really nice cinematic control of, having your subject in crisp focus against kind of a painterly cinematic background.
And because, I want to dive into ND filters a little bit more because, again, a lot of our customers are more accustomed to PTZ cameras that don't have ND filters. So I wanted to kind of just explain how that can, benefit. So imagine if you are shooting outside like this woman at the beach is, if you don't have ND filters, you're kind of limited in what you can do to, make it so you're not overexposed. You can, raise your shutter speed, or you can raise your f-stop, but that's going to increase your depth of field. It doesn't look as cinematic, but now when you add an ND filter into it, it's going to darken your image, but it's not going to add any color. It's not going to affect anything like that, but it's going to darken your image. So then you can, as you just said, open up your iris a little bit more to make that blurred background. And again, just kudos to Canon for bringing that to, PTZ cameras. So I think that's
absolutely
great.
It makes all the difference. It's really the top way that you can control how out of focus your background is to have that lens as wide open as possible. So I think you described that really well.
Well, thank you. I do have a background in narrative. Okay, so
it's almost like you know what you're talking about.
Just a little bit. The last thing that we wanted to talk about is your flagship controller, the RC-IP1000.
Yes.
And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And then I think you wanted to do a little bit more in-depth demo on the RC-IP1000 as well.
Yes, absolutely. So this controller, the RC-IP1000, as you see on the slide, it is able to bring in all of these controls. It can pan, tilt, zoom your PTZs with that joystick, and it can also receive the feed and control zooms on the cinema cameras. Obviously, you'll have physical human beings to do the panning and the tilting part with those cameras. But I do have the controller here, and right now I have it on the view that is just of the single camera that's been shooting me this whole time. And you can see the camera information that you can have up around the screen, telling you where the lens is at, what your ISO is at, what your shutter angle is at. And that's actually new from one of the newer firmwares this year, that you can see all that information on the same screen. You can also access the individual camera information by hitting the camera button, and then you can see a lot of where your gain, your black level is, your master pedestal. All of these things can be controlled and accessed very quickly. Once you're in your picture mode, that's when you can pan and tilt freely with the joystick controller, and you can zoom in and out as well. Whoa, extreme close-up. I have to admit at this point in the program that I am a terrible joystick operator. I'm a tech specialist, and I used to be a cinematographer. I used to be a cinematographer, but I never operated from a joystick. But this is where, let's say if I got way off track over to the side, and I wanted to get back to where I was, then I can go into my presets that I've already set for that individual camera. And this is where I can hit my home preset. And as you can see, it returns nicely to the composition that we've been doing for the whole program, which is this. But similarly, you can access the traces within there. And you can also, you've got the zoom control here as well that you can use if you don't want to use it on the joystick. I was just turning the joystick earlier for the control. You've got your iris control, so you can control this also real time. I think I was at an F4 is where I want to be. And then, so you have complete control here, but then this is where you can also swap between cameras. So I can go to camera 2, which is this is actually the C400, our brand new cinema camera that's behind me here. And so this is not a PTZ. This is a 6K full frame RF mount cinema camera with triple base ISO, which is super cool. Wow. And this can be controlled on the same controller as the PTZs. It does have a zoom lens on it. So while I can't pan it and tilt it, I can operate the zoom lens with this. And this is actually a good example because I can also manipulate focus here. Although it's hard to do with the delay on the Teams meeting, but there we go. So I can do focus on it as well. So you can control the cinema cameras, and then I can also go to my little, the third camera is the other PTZ, which is looking at, oh, that's my reflection. So this is the PTZ that was shooting, this is an N300 shooting the N700 PTZ that's been shooting me the whole time, but I can also do a preset that I've selected, and I can have that N300 swing down to here. So that's the same camera. I'll hit that preset again, and I'll go back home with it, and that camera will now return. Oh, come on. Demos, live demos. What are you going to do? Anyway, oh, there we go. That was operator error. And it can return to its initial setup over there. So basically, and then if you're in picture mode, what's great about this controller is you can also go to the multi-camera view. So now you can see that I have all three cameras that I have hooked up to this controller are on this multi-camera view. But what's crazy is you can actually control 200 cameras with this controller because you have 10 that are right here. If I had 10 cameras hooked up, they would all be here. And then you have 20 groups of 10 cameras that you can control. So you could have, you know, a huge array of control over a huge array of cameras just through this system. And then, like I said, I demoed earlier that you can actually control your auto tracking as well. And you can select the silhouette size and do all of that through the controller. And then up in the upper left corner is where you can control the image itself. And that's where you can actually paint using these, you know, the black, red, and blue controls and the master pedestal controls in order to really fine tune it and make sure that all of your cameras match.
Wow, that is a really powerful controller. And as you mentioned, being able to mix and match PTZs with cinema cameras and have upwards of 200 of them all playing nice at the same time. I think that's a testament to just AV over IP in general. So kudos for you.
Absolutely.
And the XC protocol. I think that you also said that you wanted to talk a little bit more about that camera behind you. So
yes.
We'll end with that. So tell me a little bit more about that camera.
So I know this is an NDI base, but I do, since I have the toys here with me now.
We like cameras. It's okay.
So this is the C400. Like I said, 6K full frame RF mount camera. And what's great about this, I'm going to get a preset ready on my my camera number one here because I am going to zoom in on something here. But what's great about it is this camera does have 1 foot firmly in the cinema world. It is what we call a cinema camera in the Canon line, but it's also got 1 foot firmly in the broadcast world. It really is made to play nice in any kind of live broadcast situation. And the key to that is all of these inputs and outputs that you've got in the back of the camera here. We've got 3G SDI, we've got 12G SDI. I'm coming out via HDMI right now. But it's also got these 2 little DIN controllers in the back. And you'll see there that one of them is even labeled. One of the DIN controllers is, if I can get this off with the HDMI in there, one of the DIN controllers is capable of doing Genlock, sync, or return video from a switcher. And that's user selectable within the menus. So this really brings it into the realm of being a broadcast camera because it can do that Genlock or return video from your switcher. It is going out IP right now to my controller. I've been controlling it with the IP1000 Canon controller. So it has the Ethernet built into the camera, whereas in previous cinema cameras, you've had to get an expansion unit to do that. Now this camera has it built in. It also has built-in Wi-Fi, so it can hook up to that iPhone app that I was demoing earlier. So it's really a very robust camera that ticks all the boxes. And it has a little brother as well in our brand new C80 that hasn't even shipped yet. And the C80 is basically all of the same specs in terms of the 6K sensor, the triple base ISO that you can choose from, RF mount. It's all of that, but in a smaller package. It's in the very popular C70 kind of form factor. So these two now are hitting, and this has Ethernet and built-in Wi-Fi as well as an addition of an SDI out that the C70 did not have. So all these cameras now are coming together to kind of really, address a lot of feedback from the field and from, the working professionals that need all these features. So we've just been packing in all the features the best we can.
I totally agree. And if we could bring this last slide up, I think what you just said wraps it up perfectly, talking about the Canon ecosystem and how they all intertwine with each other. And a lot of them are also NDI compatible, which is just fantastic, but all of them are IP compatible. And so I think that is a perfect place to end this. I want to say thank you to Matt for joining, giving us, what was that, like 6 demos? That's got to be a record. So thank you so much for showing off these cameras. The last thing that I want to say is we always give our guests the final word. So what can you tell us about NDI, what you see coming in the future from Canon? I know you kind of gave us a tease already, but without getting us in trouble, getting you in trouble, I should say, any final words that you'd like to say to our audience?
I just want to say I really just love hearing success stories from the field. The people that are using these cameras with the NDI into their switcher and using the IP, our XC protocol for control, just getting the feedback from houses of worship, from concert live events. That's really the best part of all of this, is that people are really embracing every time we come out with a new camera, a new firmware feature, getting that feedback that, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I was waiting for. This is working so well in our workflow. So at the end of the day, we're here for all of you and want to address, every need in the field.
I think that's great. And I'm not sure if they have a lower third for it, but you do also have your case study link on Canon's website. So I suggest everyone, oh, look at that. We do have it. So if you go to that link right there, you can actually see some of the case studies that Matt is referring to. And if you are using a Canon, we'd love to hear about it. So you can comment down below and we'd love to hear about it. Again, I want to say thank you to Matt and make sure that everybody tune in all month long for NDI November. You can register at NDINovember.com and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you.